Thanks for joining us for CBN News Today. I'm Ephraim Graham.
And I'm Charlene Aaron. The governor of Texas is sending 1,000 National Guard troops to the Mexican border to catch criminals exploiting the recent surge of immigrant children. Rick Perry's critics say the move is all about political posturing and a possible 2016 presidential run. But the governor says his main concern is border security. Heather Sells has the latest.
More than 57,000 children have entered the U.S. illegally since October. But Governor Rick Perry is concerned that criminal gang members are also slipping through.
Drug cartels, human traffickers, individual criminals are exploiting this tragedy for their own criminal opportunities.
Border Patrol agents have seen the criminals surge right alongside the tens of thousands of innocent children crossing. They worry that gang members from Central America will start crime rings here in the U.S.
The Border Patrol Processing Center in Nogales has confirmed, agents there have confirmed that at least 16 unaccompanied minors have admitted to being members of the very violent El Salvadorian MS-13 gang. And what that means is they're coming through just as any other minor would, and they're getting processed.
The governor says the Guard will act as a, quote, force multiplier to catch them trying to slip through.
We're planning on referring and deterring.
But critics say the Guard's impact will be limited since by law it can't make any arrests.
I don't see the National Guard being of particularly good help in this instance.
President George W. Bush sent 6,000 National Guard troops to the border in 2006, and President Obama extended that deployment while sending a second wave to 4 border states in 2010. Governor Perry is already spending an extra $1.3 million a week to get extra help with border security from the Texas Department of Public Safety. The deployment of National Guard troops will cost Texas some $12 million a month, and Perry hopes that Washington will eventually help foot that bill. Heather Sells, CBN News.
U.S. Secretary of State John Kerry is pushing for a ceasefire in Israel. He's meeting with top Egyptian and Arab League officials to try to end the fighting. Israel is working hard to eliminate rocket fire from Gaza and destroy terrorist tunnels along their border. As Chris Mitchell reports, Israeli soldiers are fighting the kind of war familiar to U.S. and Western troops.
The IDF says it's destroyed more than 20 terror tunnels and killed nearly 200 Hamas terrorists since the start of its ground operation. 4 Israeli soldiers died in this confrontation with Hamas infiltrators inside Israel's border. In the firefight, IDF troops killed most of the infiltrators. They entered Israel disguised as IDF soldiers and wore suicide belts.
Here on the Israeli-Gaza border, you can see the plumes of smoke coming from the fighting within Gaza City. The IDF has called up 60,000 troops for Operation Protective Edge. About 30 have died in the line of battle, and they find themselves fighting an enemy that uses the same tactics as Al-Qaeda in Iraq and the Taliban in Afghanistan.
They use human shields. They attempt to lure us to kill their civilian population. It's a common theme among Islamist extremist groups in this world.
Colonel Richard Kemp commanded British ground troops in Afghanistan. He refutes the claim that Israel has committed war crimes.
Everything I've seen would suggest to me that Israel is not committing a war crime. Far from it. Israel is going further than most other countries in this world would go to prevent the loss of innocent civilian life. The people that are committing the war crimes are Hamas, who are both firing rockets into the Israeli civilian population indiscriminately and also using their own people as human shields. That is a war crime. Hamas want the Israeli Defense Force to kill their children, their women, their civilians. That's what they want to happen. They want to get the propaganda.
Former IDF spokesperson Avital Leibovich says Hamas deliberately put Palestinian civilians in harm's way during the intense fighting in Sajaya.
We are trying to do everything we can in order to make sure that the civilians are evacuating the area. However, Hamas, as we've seen in this operation time and time again, through the Ministry of Interior, is forbidding those civilians, those poor civilians, and it's really tragic. He's forbidding them from leaving those areas, and then we find ourselves in very, very tough situations.
On the diplomatic front, UN Secretary Ban Ki-moon and U.S. Secretary of State John Kerry are in the region trying to broker a ceasefire. During a visit to the front lines, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu said they would expand their operation to bring quiet to Israel and a stop to Hamas rocket fire. Chris Mitchell, CBN News, on the Israeli-Gaza border.
American Christians are showing their support for the Jewish state at the 9th annual Christians United for Israel Summit. Featured speakers include CUFI founder John Hagee and Israeli Ambassador Ron Dermer. Thousands of Christians from across the country gathered in Washington, D.C. One of the major topics at Monday's summit was dispelling myths about Israel.
The American people see through the lies, the distortions in the media coverage. You know, today, you cannot believe what you hear, you can't believe what you read, you can't even believe what you see. You know what the real difference is? Hamas exists to kill. Sometimes Israel has to kill to exist.
The panel was moderated by CBN President Michael Little. CBN terrorism analyst Eric Stakelbeck was also a featured speaker. The evening ended with a united celebration between Jews and their American Christian supporters.
The conflict between Israel and Hamas has not stopped Jews from immigrating to the Holy Land. Several hours ago, a plane full of American Jews landed in Tel Aviv. CBN's George Thomas was at the airport to see it happen.
This morning, Ari Benjamin Pfeffer, his wife and 4 children from Bucks County, Pennsylvania, landed at Tel Aviv's Ben Gurion Airport. They were greeted by Israel's Prime Minister.
It's good to see you on any day, but it's especially good to see you on this day.
Pfeffer and 230 people from the United States and Canada made Aliyah, or immigrated to Israel.
It's very important for all Israelis and all Jews to understand that this is our homeland.
One of the youngest arrivals was this little guy. The oldest was this 89-year-old from Chicago.
The moment you put your foot on Israeli soil, what was that like? Tell me about it.
Quite excited. Quite excited.
The former chief rabbi of Israel told CBN News their presence in Israel is an answer to the ongoing rocket fire and conflict with terrorists in Gaza.
Our victory is on the shoulders of these children, sons and daughters of Jacob, who came to build their home.
Max Kalber from Chicago is not only becoming a citizen, but is joining the Israeli military.
The fact that the situation is not so great here, it just makes me, that's the reason why I'm coming, makes me feel strong about what I'm doing.
Each new immigrant gets this booklet, What's Next? A guide to your first steps in Israel. By the way, 26 of the new immigrants will be living in the southern Israeli cities of Ashkelon and Beersheba, epicenter for so many of the rocket attacks from Hamas.
Pfeffer's new home will be close to the Gaza border, but that doesn't scare him.
That we're not going anywhere. That we're firm, we're entrenched, this is our place, we're comfortable, and do what you will, but we're immovable.
The trip was co-sponsored by Nefesh B'Nefesh, a group that has helped more than 40,000 individuals settle in Israel. The group's leader says their efforts send an unmistakable message to the terrorists who want to destroy Israel.
Enemies think that they can knock at the Jewish people, that they can destroy the Jewish people, that they think that they can deter the Jewish people. And with all the rockets, not one single Jew canceled their plans to move to Israel.
George Thomas, CBN News, Tel Aviv, Israel.
European leaders are warning Russian President Vladimir Putin of hard-hitting sanctions if he doesn't cooperate with the investigation of the Malaysian airline Flight 17. The warning comes after pro-Russian rebels finally gave investigators the plane's black boxes days after it was shot down over eastern Ukraine. The crash site is already compromised, and forensics teams face enormous challenges poring over the debris scattered across 13 square miles. Most of the dead bodies were hauled away Monday in a refrigerated train.
The burden now is on Russia to insist that the separatists stop tampering with the evidence.
Russian media are reporting a Ukrainian bomber could have shot down the jet, thinking it was President Putin's official plane. Others in Russia even claim Ukraine filled a plane with dead bodies and shot it down to create an incident. U.S. officials call those theories nonsense.
The U.S. is condemning the Islamic radicals who forced thousands of Christians to flee for their lives from Iraq's second largest city. Last week, the so-called Islamic State used loudspeakers to threaten the Christians in Mosul. They gave them till midday Saturday to either convert to Islam, pay a protection tax, or die. The vast majority of the Christians then fled to other cities. A State Department spokesman says the U.S. is outraged about the death threat. This may be the final exodus of Christians from Mosul, where Christian communities had lived for nearly 2,000 years.
Religious freedom advocates are raising concerns about President Obama's executive order barring federal contractors from discriminating against gays. Though the order allows religious groups to only employ people within their own faith, it doesn't make allowance for requiring them to live according to the moral teachings of those faiths. The Family Research Council says challenges could be brought by people who claim to be a part of a church body but have lifestyles that don't follow the church's teaching. They say the executive order could make faith groups forego federal contracts.
Coming up, on the front lines of a deadly outbreak, how one ministry is braving a very dangerous situation to bring help and to bring hope.
Wildfires continue to burn across the western part of the U.S. today. Flames consumed more than 940,000 acres in Oregon and Washington state. Fast-moving fires wiped out entire neighborhoods in Washington, with 20 counties declaring states of emergency. One fire burned 380 square miles, more than 4 times the size of Seattle. Fire officials say the fire is only 2% contained, but things are improving. Cooler temperatures and reduced winds are helping firefighters battle a fire in Okanagan County, which has burned about 150 homes.
I want to turn now to Africa, where an outbreak of one of the world's deadliest diseases is happening. Ebola has no known cure, and health workers say it is spreading in the western part of the continent. The World Health Organization says more than 600 deaths have been recorded since last February. Why is it spreading, and will it come to the United States? That is an even bigger question. Gary Lane explains.
Ebola is one of the deadliest diseases in the world, and now health workers say it is spreading. West Africa is facing a serious crisis, the largest ever outbreak of Ebola. Christian International Relief Organization Samaritan's Purse is among several non-government organizations that have responded to the crisis. Its medical team director, Dr. Lance Plyler, talked to us via Skype from Monrovia, Liberia, and described the outbreak as monumental.
It's really unprecedented. Right now, it's not just a problem within a given country. It's a real sub-regional problem in terms of geographical distribution and in terms of patients infected.
There is no known cure for the virus, but in the past, health workers have successfully prevented the disease from spreading. Plyler suggested the disease isn't always recognized because some of the symptoms mask diseases endemic to West Africa, such as malaria or typhoid.
Initially, the person presents with fever, and then a malaise. Their muscles and their joints begin to ache very intensely. It's followed by nausea, vomiting, diarrhea, and then in the very advanced cases, there can be bleeding.
So how is the disease spreading?
The people in this region, they eat what we call bush meat, which can involve eating bat, and that's what occurs with the primary transmission is that a person will eat some meat, perhaps bush meat, perhaps a bat. It's very, very infectious through body fluids. Unfortunately, just through the transmission of body sweat. It's very cultural here with the burial ceremony that the loved ones prepare the body, and there's a lot of washing of the body and preparation for burial. And that is a very, very common mode of transmission.
He said Ebola is unlikely to spread to America, but more doctors and nurse volunteers are needed to help the effort. CBN's Operation Blessing was also among the first to respond to the Ebola outbreak. Last May, OB sent medical supplies, including gloves, face masks, and coveralls with hoods, to the Liberian government. The items were used by aid workers treating Ebola patients on the Sierra Leone border. Gary Lane, CBN News.
Up next, there are preachers at 2 of America's largest churches, and you've never seen them like this. Hear what broke these 2 pastors and how they mended their hearts. Tennessee State Public Library is putting a database of family Bibles online. Bibles once served as the place where families recorded milestones such as weddings, births, and deaths. The state of Tennessee didn't even require birth certificates until 1908, and the U.S. Department of Homeland Security still accepts a family Bibles list as one of birth as one proof of citizenship for those with no birth certificate. The Bibles in the database include one from 1538 and a book dating back to 1753.
6 years ago this week, Pastor Greg Laurie lost his son in a tragic car accident. Now he's turned his grief into an award-winning movie, and it's helping other people to deal with their own pain. Lori Johnson talked with Greg and his wife, Kathy, at their church in Los Angeles.
Now, the things people turn to may change, but the void in our life, that emptiness, it's a loneliness for God.
Greg Laurie pastors one of America's largest churches, the 15,000-member Harvest Christian Fellowship in L.A. But despite his strong faith, he was literally knocked off his feet when he learned his son Christopher was killed in a car crash.
I just collapsed on the ground, and for days I felt like I was carrying a huge weight on my chest. I mean, literally, I felt a physical pressure where I just, it was just like, how will I get through this?
Kathy Laurie said she felt her dreams disappear.
That day, I felt like God had taken a big eraser to this chalkboard and just said, no, erase this all. This isn't how it's going to play out.
Whether it's the loss of a loved one, financial ruin, or a health crisis, people everywhere are losing hope.
But the Lauries say you can find hope by watching how others did it.
I wanted to look at somebody else who had been through this. It was one of the reasons why we made this film.
This movie will help to point them to God and say, here's other people who've experienced something as bad as what you are experiencing, maybe even worse, depending. And there's hope.
In addition to the Lauries, the movie profiles Nick Vujicic, who was born with no arms or legs.
I would try put on a brave face at school and pretend it wouldn't hurt. But I would be up all night crying, praying, God, give me arms and legs, give me arms and legs. And he wouldn't give it to me.
Also, Christian singer Jeremy Camp, whose wife died of cancer.
And to see not a progression, but a digression, basically, of what was happening in her health, there's just doubts. God, are you listening? Like, what? Do you know that we're here? I mean, are you hearing these prayers?
For the Lauries, Nick and Jeremy, hope began when they stopped asking why.
And instead, we should be asking the what question, as in, what should I do now? How should I react? And I think what we want to do is lean into Christ, and we want to seek to bring glory to his name through this. And one day, all of those whys will be resolved.
At first, Nick was so hopeless, he planned to drown himself.
And I knew what that water represented. It was the end of my pain. It was the end of hell for me. I just wanted out.
But right before he killed himself, he decided to give Jesus another chance.
The revelation for me came from John chapter 9. Jesus came across a man who was born blind, and no one knew why. But Jesus said it was done so that the works of God would be revealed through him. And I'm like, wow. Maybe I don't need to know God's plans for God's plans to be even implemented in my life. What if God did have a plan for me?
God did have a plan that was fulfilled. It included a wife, a child, and traveling the world, spreading the good news to millions.
I hope people are inspired to see that you don't need arms and legs to be complete. You don't need arms and legs to be the hands and feet of God. All you need is to be complete on the inside, and everything else will change.
Like Nick, when Jeremy was about to give up on God, he did an about-face, and out came the song I Still Believe, a #1 hit. Dozens would follow, drawing millions closer to the Lord.
It was just me going, I don't understand. It doesn't make sense. But I still believe in your faithfulness, and your truth, and your word. And that was such a healing time for me.
'Cause I still believe
Even after losing their son, Greg and Kathy found that God comforted them, gave them hope for the future, and even filled their hearts with joy again.
You are not in control and you don't have control, but God is in control. And I was thankful that in my pain and in the crisis of that moment, I was absolutely certain that God was not surprised by this and that He was with us and He would walk us through this.
I think we're here on earth for two reasons. We're here, number one, to know God, and we're here to glorify God. But I have found that when we fulfill our purpose as Christians, we will find happiness as a byproduct. Not from seeking it, but from seeking Him.
So the message from people who have felt the deepest despair is don't give up on God, because God will never give up on you. Lori Johnson, CBN News.
I tell you, from tragedy to praise to encouragement to other people, it's amazing.
Absolutely. And it's really good to see pastors just open up like that, because many people think they don't suffer.
Exactly.
And it's good to see exactly how you push through it.
Yeah.
We'll be right back. Finally today, CBN's Operation Blessing is helping Israeli families under threat of rockets from Gaza.
That's right. Bomb shelters in private homes, as well as local parks and bus stops, are quickly running out of supplies as families spend more and more time in them. Families are in need of water, food, diapers, baby food, and drinks. Operation Blessing teams are packing boxes of food and other supplies to replenish local bomb shelters in border towns. And you can find out more about Operation Blessing by going to ob.org. And that's going to do it for now on CBN News Today. You can find more of our exclusive coverage of the issues you care most about at cbnnews.com.
We want to hear what you think about the stories you've seen here today. You can talk to us on Facebook or at CBN News on Twitter. Hope you join us again right here next time. Make it a terrific Tuesday, everybody.